Hey everybody, my name is Taylor Glenn and this is my channel Taylor Tries, where I try new things and I try to teach you new things. And today I'm going to try to teach you how to understand Siteswap. Now, if you've ever heard jugglers say a bunch of stream of numbers like 441 and 423 and DB97531, you might be really confused. That's Siteswap. Siteswap is a notation that jugglers use to describe the height and the timing of juggling patterns. Now, I know when I first started juggling, I was really confused by this whole concept and it took me years to figure it out. But honestly, it's not that complicated and I'm going to try to describe it in a way that will help you figure it out a lot faster. So, let's do it. Before I get too far into it, I want to take a second and thank everyone who is a member of my Otter Club over on Patreon. It's because of people like you that I can make these free tutorials for everyone else, and I really appreciate it. Members of my Patreon also get an additional part to this tutorial where I'm going to show a bunch of site swaps in slow motion, followed by a brief explanation of each one, breaking down each throw, because I know it's confusing. So if you want that, you can get immediate access for only $2. And for $5 members of my Patreon, you get access to my entire slow motion catalog full of slow motion tricks. There's a link in the description. In this tutorial, I'll be covering what we call vanilla Siteswap, which basically means there are no synchronous throws and there are no multiplex throws. Vanilla Siteswap assumes that you're always throwing one object at a time and you're always alternating hands. That's important. Remember that. That will help a lot. So as I mentioned, Siteswap is composed of numbers, but there are also letters. I'll get to that in a second, but basically there are a series of numbers and each number is going to represent one throw in the pattern. Or to be more specific, one beat in the pattern, because juggling is rhythmic. But if that confuses you, just think of them each as one throw. And remember, it will always go alternating hands. So when you see one number, that means it's thrown with one hand. The next number will be thrown with the other hand. It also doesn't matter which hand you start with. You can start with your right or your left hand, as long as you're alternating every throw. So you read it from left to right, and the numbers go in that order. But what do the numbers actually mean? Good question. What it actually means is more to do with the timing of when you're gonna throw that object again, but I always found that really confusing. So the general rule of thumb is that it represents how high you're supposed to throw each prop. You can check out the Wikipedia article, it'll explain more, but basically that number means how high you should throw it. So let's start with the most basic throw. When we juggle 3 balls, we juggle it about right here. Well, this is a 3. So a 3 is a throw done about at 3-ball height. That's the easiest rule of thumb that you're gonna learn, is that each number is gonna represent about how high you would juggle that many objects. So whenever you see a 3 in a Siteswap, it will look like that. It will cross and it'll go about that high. That's a 3. So if a 3 represented how you would throw a 3-ball pattern, then a 4 represents how you would throw a 4-ball pattern, which is like this. So basically a 4 is a ball that goes straight up and does not cross, just like when we juggle a 4-ball fountain, and it goes a little bit higher than a 3. That's a 4. So whenever you see a 4 in a pattern, that means you throw the ball like that. So we have a 3 and a 4. 3, 4. Following that same logic, a 5 is how you would throw a 5-ball pattern. Whenever you see a 5 in a Siteswap, it means it's crossing hands and it's going about as high as you would throw a 5-ball pattern. So to recap, we have a 3, a 4, and a 5. Based on that logic so far, you can guess that a 6 is going to be just like a 4, where it doesn't cross, but even higher. So you may notice now that all the odd numbers are always going to cross, and all the even numbers are always going to go straight up to the same hand. That's really important to know. It's just like in the base juggling patterns. When you juggle 4, they don't cross. When you juggle 6, they don't cross. However, when you juggle 3, 5, and 7, they do cross, so with Siteswap, that's the easiest thing to remember. Odd numbers will be crossing, even numbers will go straight up, and the higher the number gets, the higher the throws get, to basically match the height of the pattern that you would juggle with that many objects. It's important to know that the heights are relative in Siteswap. So the height of each throw might vary from person to person, or even from pattern to pattern. What really matters is the relationship between the numbers. So when I throw a 3, it might be higher than when you throw a 3. But as long as my 5 is also higher, then it doesn't really matter, because the relationship between those is the same. Based on what we know, let's look at a pattern that incorporates some of those numbers. Here you'll see a 6-3-3. Remember that each number is one throw. So we're gonna start by throwing one ball straight up, that's the 6, and then 2 balls low and crossing. Those are 2 3s. Then it repeats on the other side. You'll notice that it's going right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Because in vanilla Siteswap, you can always assume that you're supposed to alternate hands unless you see some special symbols, which I will cover in a future tutorial. Here we're doing a 4-ball half shower. This pattern can be written as 5-3. So if we look at it, we'll notice that all the balls are crossing, which makes sense because both the numbers are odd. One ball is being thrown at a 5-ball height, followed by the next ball being thrown at a 3-ball height. 5-3, 5-3, 5-3. That's a half shower with 4 balls. That's the basics of Siteswap. It's really not that hard. But there are a couple numbers that are a little weird. So let's go over those now. So we know that odd numbers crossed, and we started at a 3, but what about a 1? Well, based on that logic, if a 3 is about this high, then a 1 would be a little tiny throw. What we typically do with 1s instead is we throw them straight across because of the timing. So a 1 is just a straight across throw. Now that we understand a 1, let's take a look at some patterns that incorporate it. 5-3-1 is a really popular 3-ball pattern that incorporates 1s. So we'll notice that we're throwing 1 ball high, 1 ball kind of high, and then that quick 1 across. So we have a 5, a 3, and a 1. And then it repeats. All right, the next weird one is a 2. 2s are essential in your Siteswap knowledge, and they open up a whole world of possibilities. Following our same logic, we know that 2s probably shouldn't cross hands, right? And we know that it should be smaller than a 4. So it should maybe look like this, but that's not really necessary because it just ends up being a pretty worthless throw. What we do instead is we just hold the ball. So a 2 is this. A 2 is basically a beat where you do not throw the ball. You can think of it like a really mini throw if it helps your brain understand it better, but it basically means that you're just holding a ball for a beat and then continuing with the other hand. Pretty much what that always means is when you see a 2, you're gonna end up throwing 2 balls from the same hand. So for example, let's take a really popular pattern called 4-2-3. So a 4-2-3 starts with 1 ball straight up, that's the 4. And now we throw a 2 with the other hand, but that means we're not throwing, so we're just holding that ball. Followed by a 3 with the hand that first threw, because we're alternating hands. So it ends up being right, right, left, left. Since there is still technically a beat there, that 2 has to be counted as a number. So the 2 is just a pause. So again, anytime you see a 2, that means you're gonna be throwing 2 balls from the same hand in a row, rather than alternating. Unless there are 2 2s in a row. Let's take a look at 5-2-2. 5-2-2 is just basically throwing a 3-ball cascade pretty high. We're throwing 1 ball at a 5-ball height, and then waiting for 2 beats before we throw another ball at that height. So you can think of it again like a rhythm. Siteswap should always be seen as an alternating hand, continuous rhythm. So we're gonna see 5-2-2, 5-2-2, 5-2-2. We have to notate those 2s because otherwise it would be a continuous 5-ball cascade. The other thing you can note about 2s is that they can be active or inactive. So an inactive 2 is what I just described, where we're just holding the ball and not doing anything with it. But since there is technically a beat there, we can do something with that 2, such as a quick little toss. You can do that to itself, you can do that around a thing. As long as that timing works as a pause, it can't be as high as a 4, but you can make a 2 active by throwing it very quickly to the same hand. So it's just like a mini 4. It can't be as high as a 4, otherwise the timing won't work out. The other thing about 2s is that it allows you to move that ball because that hand is not doing anything. The next weird number that we encounter is a 0. Based on what we've learned so far, we know that each number is supposed to represent about how high you would throw that many balls. So this is how high we throw 3 balls, this is how high we throw 5 balls. Well, when we have 0 balls, we have 0 balls. There's nothing to do. So a 0 is an empty hand. Here I'm just struggling 1 ball, but there are technically still 3 beats happening, so I have to account for all of them in Siteswap. So I have a 3, and then I have 2 empty hands. Even though I don't have any objects to throw for those extra 2 throws, the timing is still there, and I still need to account for it with Siteswap. So we have 3, 0, 0, 3, 0, 0, 3, 0, 0. They're different than a 2 because with a 2, we're holding a ball there for that beat, and a 0, we have no ball there for that beat. So for example, let's take a look at 5-5-5-0-0. 5-5-5-0-0 is a 3-ball flash. We're throwing 3 balls up at a 5-ball height, 5-5-5, and then we have 2 beats where both hands are empty. Remember, it's alternating. We have to count for that right hand and that left hand. Both of those are empty, so those are both 0s. You can think of this pattern as a 5-ball cascade with 2 missing balls, and those 2 missing balls are 0s. All right, the last weird number system that you might see in vanilla Siteswap are letters. you might see things like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are basically just continuations of the numbers past 9, because we can't start writing 10 since that would be a 1 and a 0. So once you get past 9, 10 is A. So an A is a straight up throw that goes really high. A B is a crossing throw that goes really high. A C is a straight up throw that goes even higher than an A, and so on and so forth. Now that you understand what each of the numbers means, let's cover some rules that will help you understand even better how to read Siteswap. First, you need to know that you're going to try to truncate the Siteswap as much as possible before it repeats. So we don't want to write 531, 531, 531, 531 forever. But since it repeats after 531, we just write the Siteswap as 531. We don't have to add those extra numbers because they're repeating. With that same logic, when we're juggling 3 balls, we're throwing 3s over and over and over again. So technically, after that first 3, it's just repeating. So all we have to do to describe the 3-ball cascade in Siteswap is write 3. So this is 3. Similarly, the 4-ball fountain is written as 4. You don't have to write 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Same with 5, 6, 7. All of those are just one number Siteswaps. The next thing you need to know when reading it is that it doesn't really matter which order that you do the numbers in, as long as they do technically go in the order that they're supposed to be thrown. So you could write 423 as 234 or 342. It technically does not matter. A lot of jugglers will start with the highest number first, or the rule that I like to follow is whichever number you would start with first from the base pattern is how you should write the Siteswap. So let's take 423, which is a 3-ball pattern. The first throw that we would do out of the 3-ball cascade would be a 4, 4, because up until that point it's still 3s. So 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. That's why most people write it as 4, 2, 3 instead of 3, 4, 2, because the 4 is the first throw out of that base pattern. The next thing you need to know is that Siteswap does not account for any sort of body throws or how you throw the ball. It doesn't let you know whether a pattern is being thrown under the arm or behind the back or as an outside throw or anything like that. So for example, the 3-ball cascade is a 3, so is Mills Mess, because technically all of these throws are still 3s. It does not matter how you throw them. Siteswap only accounts for the timing. The amount of numbers that a Siteswap has before it repeats is what is known as its period. 423 is 3 numbers before it repeats. That means it's a period 3. 744 is also 3 numbers before it repeats, so it is also a period 3. 7531, however, has 4 numbers before it repeats, so it has a period of 4. It's not really necessary to know, but you might hear some jugglers talk about a Siteswap's period, and that's what it means. If a Siteswap's period is even, so like 2, 4, 6, that many numbers before it repeats, that means the Siteswap is going to be one-sided, like 5, 3. If it's odd, like 3, 5, 7, that many numbers before it repeats, it means it will change hands every time, like 6, 3, 3. The 6 is happening with one hand, but then the next time it's happening with the other hand. Another good thing to know about Siteswap is that you can figure out how many objects a Siteswap is based on some very simple math. Add up all the numbers in a Siteswap and divide it by its period that I just talked about. Let's take 441. We add 4 plus 4 plus 1 is 9. We divide that by its period. There's 3 numbers, so we divide it by 3. That comes out as 3, which means it's a 3-ball pattern. Let's take 744. We add up those numbers, we get 15. We divide by its period, which is 3. We get 5. That means 744 is a 5-ball pattern. This is a really good way to figure out how many objects you're supposed to use when you try to do a Siteswap. It also, for the most part, can tell you whether that Siteswap is even possible, or what we call valid. That's not true for every Siteswap, but I don't want to get too much into that math. For the most part, that is a pretty good rule of thumb, and it will usually tell you if a Siteswap is valid. But if you want to learn more about that, again, there's a Wikipedia article I linked in the description. It will tell you way more about how to test for validity of a Siteswap. That's pretty much all I have for you on how to understand vanilla Siteswap. There is a more advanced version of Siteswap that includes synchronous throws and multiplexes, which I'll cover in a future tutorial, but for now, this should get you started. There are a lot of Siteswap generators available both online and on mobile phones, and they can be really helpful for translating certain Siteswaps that you might see that you have no idea how to do. As I mentioned, members of my Otter Club on Patreon will have an additional part to this tutorial where I'm going to show a handful of Siteswaps in slow motion and then briefly break them down and explain what each throw is doing so that you can understand what's happening. So if you want access to that, you can get that immediately right now for only $2. There's a link in the description. And for $5 members of my Patreon, you get access to my entire slow motion catalog full of slow motion tricks, including a bunch of 3 and 4 and 5 ball site swaps that will hopefully help you test your site swap knowledge and just have some great tricks that you can learn. So if you want access to that, it's only $5 in my Patreon, and there's a link in the description. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope this tutorial helped. Remember to just take your time with it. Know that it's a whole new language basically, and it might be a little confusing at first, but I'm sure with a little bit of practice, it'll start to become really easy to read. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. My microphone is picking up that weed whacker really loud, and if he could just stop for like a half hour, I could finish. It'd be great. And then quickly throw one across. And then quickly throw one. And then quickly